Good morning, everyone, and welcome. And welcome to JD. You are so welcome, and I'm so glad that we can have a chat today.
I'm so glad to have this conversation, and thank you for inviting me, Prof.
Thank you. And tell us more about yourself, please.
So my name is JD, and I'm a South African, and I trained in South Africa, but currently I do reside in Auckland, New Zealand, where I work in a cardiothoracic and vascular intensive care unit, which is a referral hospital for the New Zealand and some of the Pacific Islands. And I really enjoy my work there. Apart from that, I'm also a zealous student, and having completed my master's at the Northwest University, Prof, where you also work, I started my Doctor of Nursing Science degree at the University of Johannesburg.
Yes, that's wonderful, and you're progressing well with that.
Yes, I am progressing, and I'm currently in the final stages of the study. The study is called A Model for Nurse Anesthesia Practice in South Africa.
And that is also very interesting. Tell us more about that. And I've read your work, and you are saying that there is not such a nurse at the moment, and there is a need for such a nurse at the moment.
So in South Africa, there is no professional registration for nurse anesthesia. And that is really interesting because there's such a great need for anesthesia care and services, which is safe and affordable, and especially in the rural parts of South Africa. But before one can introduce such a program, a practice model as a foundation needs to be laid. And this practice model ought to inform educational curriculum, it ought to inform scope of practice, it ought to inform research. So this is really seminal work, and very interesting. Just on a, if you look at the whole Africa continent, a lot of countries only has nurse anesthetists that administer and provide anesthesia services to patients. So this is not a new thing. It would just be new to South Africa, which has the very interesting milieu in which they have their healthcare system.
Oh, definitely. And it seems to me that it's really a stepping stone to bigger things to come. And you are actually opening the door for new opportunities for nursing in South Africa.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, so I'm so interested in to hear your view on presence and maybe some stories about presence that you encountered in practice.
I would love to share. I think that my first encounter with presence in nursing, or maybe the first time the penny dropped, is in one of our first classes in midwifery, as in my bachelor's degree. And that is when the lecturer said, well, what is a midwife? A midwife means with women, with the women. And that dropped, and I said, I thought by myself, listen, if you're with the woman, you're not with the paperwork. You don't leave the woman. You're with the woman. You help the woman, and that really had a severe impact in me. And so by the definition of midwife, it is to be with women, and intrinsically in the definition of nurse, that is also to have a presence with the patient. And you always hear that nursing is both a science and an art, and a science that they take university and they teach you the physiology, the anatomy, pathophysiology, what have you. but they cannot teach you the art. And the art is to be with the patient and to pick up things that science will never be able to pick up. Oftentimes I think, and I think by myself, all right, what is the difference between maybe a non-clinical nursing role, whether that's maybe coordinator or maybe even a medical role, and a bedside nurse, and especially that in critical care. And I find that the nurse that's often with the patient has valuable insights, very, very, very valuable insights, because that nurse has been monitoring this patient and picking up, maybe hearing what the family is saying, maybe finding the dynamics of the family, maybe seeing trends in the patient's monitoring, but then you get the more objective view of maybe the coordinator, and the coordinator will sometimes come and say, just change this. And you wonder, why is this coordinator able to say that? And that is because they come with a fresh perspective. So in nursing, it's very important to be with the patient. And there's also a very, very small ideal where they should not be with the patient all the time. But when they step in, they bring a very valuable insight. And that is the objective side. So both the subjective and objective work so well together to be a nurse that is present and with the patient. I actually spoke to a student nurse anesthetist in the States just earlier today, and I asked her perspective on the independent practice of nurse anesthetists, whether they should be oversighted or supervised by a medical anesthesiologist or not. And she remarked one thing, and that might stay with me for a wee while, and that is that the nurse anesthetist should always be with the patient, from admission, through induction, through emergence, through discharge, be with the patient. But the person that supervises can maybe just step in and step out of the operating room and give advice. But ultimately, it is that nurse anesthetist that is with the patient that has a final say, and perhaps have the authority because they didn't leave the patient's bedside. You also asked me about some stories that I can share of presence, and I would really like to share a few stories. So me working in a critical care area, oftentimes, or actually all the time, you're allocated to just one or at the most two patients. And one night shift I came on, and when I walked in the unit, I saw the emergency chest opening trolley open, and I thought, oh, some patient had a big problem today. And I inquired about this, and I learned that it was a very traumatic experience. Just 45 minutes before I arrived, that a very young patient, if I recall correctly, 16 or 18 year, passed away because of some critical illness. And when I saw the allocation for the night, I saw that my name is next to this deceased patient, and I thought, this is so interesting because for one, I cannot go wrong because the patient is dead, and we do laugh about it. But there's something that's quite significant with that. And did they just waste resources to allocate a nurse to be with this deceased patient while the family is still with the patient? No, they did not waste resources, because they allocated a nurse to be with the deceased and with the family because it is necessary. It is necessary for that nurse to just be there, look at the paperwork, complete the paperwork that might take you 20 minutes or half an hour, but be there. And if the family might come in and ask questions, for them to be able to have an answered question, or maybe just can I bring you a cup of water? Wait, let me bring a fresh box of tissues. And just to be there for the family, even though the patient is deceased, even though we might have a chuckle over it later, but to know that you've made a difference because that family looked out of the door of that room and saw a nurse and knew they were not alone.
That's amazing.
There's another story that I would like to share, and that is that of a patient that very early in the morning, I think it was maybe 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, and it is that time where everyone is very tired, but things still happen and patients still deteriorate. And so in this instance, we had a patient who had severe hypoxia, very short breath, saturations just going down, oxygenation requirements going up. And we knew that there's one thing that needed to happen, and that is to intubate this patient, or actually re-intubate this patient. Otherwise, the patient will just suffocate in the oxygen that we provide via nasal prongs or mask or high flow oxygen. And this patient was obviously still conscious and still chatting away, but ever so more struggling. And the whole team was there to intubate this patient, and it's a stressful time because this needs to happen, and it needs to happen now. And the patient looked at one of the nurses standing next to him, and he said, "Just pass me my phone. Let me just text my wife. It's too early to phone her." And that nurse granted it and the request of the patient. And I think in the back of each person's mind, everyone was just get on with it. We need to intubate you, otherwise you're not going to make it very far. Well, that was the last text that wife received from this patient. But if that nurse was not present, very solemn, very nice remembrance would have passed. And just to grant that patient the wish, let me just text my wife. Just to be next to the patient and listen to the request. Seeing his eyes that I know it's not going well with me at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, that is amazing. I really agree with you that if that wish was not granted, it would have been such a loss of that opportunity. Yes.
I often tell family members of critically ill patients, I tell them, listen, you go home. It's fine. I can see you're tired. I can see you're hungry. You go home, but I'm here. If you wake up throughout the night, if maybe you took a nap, wake up, pick up the phone, call me, I'll be here.
Wow.
Just to let the family know that even though this patient is sedated, chemically sedated, we know that family member know that there's someone next to that patient that will never leave the patient, and be with the patient, be there if something goes wrong, be there if the patient is improving, be there all the time. And in our unit, we've got a policy that we don't leave the room without telling someone. We don't leave the room alone. So oftentimes you have to call someone from outside and say, just come stand here while I make while I make myself a cup of tea. Just stand here for 5 minutes or 2 minutes. I need to get something from the stock room. Just stand here. And that is so important for us, because it means that, yes, we can quickly identify if something goes wrong, but actually it's far more beyond than that, because the monitors can pick it up if something goes wrong, and it can tell us if something's wrong. Even if you're very far, you can hear the monitor. But to be next to the patient and be with the patient is so much more important. That is where science hit the art, where it connects. I almost said where the tacky hits the tar, but this is where I hate the art.
Yes. Oh, wow. Thank you so much for everything that you are sharing. Every little thing that you are saying is so profound. I think I will have to view our conversation again to really uh, appreciate again what you are saying. You're really giving us a lot of food for thought. And I love what you are saying about everything that you said. It's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. And they're all the way from Auckland in New Zealand. I wonder if you have a word of encouragement for fellow nurses.
Yes, I would very much like to share that, and thank you for asking. When I read the interview schedule and saw the questions beforehand, I think you emailed that to me so that I can ponder on it. When I saw this question, at first I was a bit reluctant, because in me that's not me. but that challenged me, and I like such a challenge, and I would like to encourage nurses who's viewing your channel with the vowels. You get consonants and you get vowels, and A, E, I, U, O, and I'll say A for advocate. You as a nurse, where you are, whether that's in the emergency department, operating room, community nurse, mental health nurse, wherever you are, advocate for your patient, because you are there with your patient. That's your job. You don't have any other job. You're there with your patient and advocate for them. Stand in their shoes and say, if this patient was talking, if this patient was being able to argue their case in front of the doctors, in front of the multidisciplinary team, advocate for them. That is you. I'll say E for educate, and educate other nurses. Whether you are a second year nursing student, you're already a senior of a first year student, and whether whether you've been in practice for 20 years, 25 years, maybe you've got a highest qualification there is to obtain in your area, teach other nurses, educate other nurses to become who you are. They already know the science. They've been through university, but teach them the art of being present. And with that, and very closely associated with that, is to inspire other nurses. Inspire the community to become nurses. If someone asks you in the mall, why are you a nurse? Inspire them. Because the nurses that you inspire will one day probably nurse you when you're sick. So make sure you inspire many nurses. As we know that worldwide there's a nurse shortage. Inspire people to become nurses. Let it not be the profession that's the back end of the healthcare sector, but inspire people to be nurses and see the value and the art in that. U is the letter U I have to force this one to become a U, like YOU. And that is to look after yourself. If you look after yourself, you can look after others well.
Mm.
I've worked with this very outspoken nurse many years ago. And around about 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, she would come to me and say, JD, did you pee? And even though it might be a bit crude, uh, it's a very valuable thing, because what she actually said is, JD, did you look after yourself? I know you've been slaving after your patients for the past 3 or 4 hours, but JD, look after yourself. Take 5 minutes, make yourself a cuppa, go to the toilet, and you'll be refreshed.
Mm.
But if you look after yourself, you can effectively look after others, and that is the O and the last vowel. Look after others, look after your patients, look after your fellow nurses, look after the rest of the multidisciplinary team. Even if they smile, they also hurt. Even though they might have a different pay scale, their feet also hurt. They also get shaving from walking about. They're also tired. Look after others, so that you're not only a nurse to your patients, but you're a nurse to the whole hospital.
Wow. Thanks so much for sharing that. That is really very encouraging and an acronym to remember. So thank you so much for that. Wow. Thank you, JD, for sharing your wisdom. I really appreciate it, and I think it, and I believe it will go a far way. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Prof, and I'm glad to have this conversation with you.
Me too. Thank you very much.